both have a good chance to fail. If you had to pick one to start with, the jail would be the wiser choice. This is the service that we, as elected officials, are legally obligated to supply. The COA does have benefits to the public, but there are better ways to provide these services without spending $3 to $5 million on a new building. Many of the functions of the COA are better served, not to mention less expensive, in the outer areas of the county in the taxpayer's own backyard. And even the jail has critical questions to be answered relative to the size and the location to be most effective use of the facility and operation dollars. As I've said many times before, look at both issues from 10,000 feet for the big picture relative to the use intended and spending valuable tax dollars wisely. Now, attached to this, there was an article in the Charlotte, well, it's the County Journal, it covers Eaton County. Invitation to join conversation on needs of older adults. The Michigan Commission on Services to the Aging. They are inviting the public to join community conversations throughout the state to discuss the needs of older residents. It's a very good article. I don't know if we're going to have one in here in Berry County, but I would highly suggest that we do. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for today. Thank you.
Any other public comments this morning? Hearing none. Is Jim up here?
You're skipping.
I guess we're gonna have to. You gonna try to track him down? All right, I don't have Jim Yarger or Jim Dahl. Did they forget they were coming today?
He might be right downstairs.
This would be to make them the fiduciary, right? The
Yeah,
county
something
fiduciary?
about the intergovernmental service agreement.
I would put him towards the end.
It's gonna be a short meeting.
It's the other side.
Bronx.
It's the other side.
Well, Don, Jim Yarger, right? Not
Yeah,
Jim Dahl.
I'm missing Jim Yarger. Well, Jim can come up. Can you see? Thanks. Sorry for the delay.
Talk about the Super Bowl or something.
We could.
Chiefs.
But wouldn't be germane to county business, though.
We are on time. I mean,
We are,
according to the schedule.
Rusty meeting.
yeah. Not very often I don't have people show up. I mean, I can go ahead and start talking about other stuff, but then they'd be,
I think he's got him up here.
Trying to escape. Pretty sad when we got out of the police escort.
We're gonna take a break while they get set up.
sure. Let's take a 5-minute break while they get ready to,
Yeah, I was watching.
oh, they're not set. Do you need to set up anything?
Just grab a couple chairs. Just
Okay. Alrighty.
I'm gonna sit on the side.
So, we're gonna take them as they're printed. Jim, resolution for Cloverdale Lake, Wilkinson Lake, Jones Lake, and Mud Lake. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-6, resolution for preliminary study of Cloverdale Lake, Wilkinson Lake, Jones Lake, and Mud Lake.
So moved. Support.
Moved by Jackson, support by Gibson. The floor is yours.
As everybody knows, we have some issues down in the southern part of the county that need to be addressed with moving water. We've got a permit in to DEQ to move water out of Long Lake, out of Cloverdale Lake, out of the chain of lakes through there, and also to take water off Crooked Lake. That'd be the northern short-term route to get quite a bit of water and get all their waters regulated. The DEQ is hesitant to give us a permit without knowing what the lake levels, when we get all said and done, are gonna be. So they've hinted around that to get that permit, they would like to see lake levels set. So I brought Brian Sensi from GEI, Nick DeSempla from GEI, and Lauren Burton from Clark Hill to go over the technicalities of it. So I'll leave it to them.
So Lauren is Doug now, right?
Yeah, I'm done. For the day.
John, you're getting old. Think she looks like Doug.
I guess what I was trying to say is the same law firm, right?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Doug had prior commitments that he just couldn't get out of, so.
Questions for our guests? Go ahead,
So
Vivian.
you're looking at me.
I looked first.
So I have, one of my first questions is on Resolution 2006, Mud Lake is listed, but it's also listed on 2008.
There are two separate mud lakes.
Oh, the two separate Mud Lakes?
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a lot of mud lakes around.
Yeah, there's one
Just-
over in my district.
just
so.
making sure.
Mud Lake connected to Pleasant, and then it's also Mud Lake connected in the very upstream end of Jones Lake
Okay.
and the Cloverdale chain of lakes.
All right, I just want to make sure that it wasn't the same one twice. All right, thanks.
Ben?
Thanks. How long are these studies gonna take?
This is just for the preliminary study, which is the feasibility, which pretty much, I mean, it's all done, a couple weeks, this part.
So we're being required to have a feasibility study to determine the lake level?
No, there's a two-part process under 307 that the board can choose to do, and at least from my understanding, when talking to Michael, that was the way they wanted to draft the resolutions, to do the feasibility first, and then if it's feasible to do it, these lake levels, then you'll go through and do the actual study part, which on these two, Long Lake and Cloverdale, the majority of the work is done.
So it's not a feasibility to determine the lake level, it's a feasibility for moving the water?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
Yep.
this preliminary study is optional at the directive of the board. If they
Okay.
choose to have that preliminary study done to get the results of that before proceeding with the actual lake level project.
What's my last question is, what's the maximum length this study could last? Because we've all seen studies, we've been involved in county and state government that seem to go on forever.
This preliminary one, or the actual study when you go through the court process and set the legal lake level?
How about both?
I mean, by statute, there's no limitation. on
Right.
the Duration, but the first one's very quick, the second one could be drawn out depending on court challenges.
If people challenge the level that is being proposed, like
Okay,
you know, that could delay it.
all right, so it's set by statute,
Right,
not
but,
by,
but on these two lakes, the majority of the work we basically had to do for a permit. So the amount of level of efforts, maybe another 10 or 15% to actually set the legal lake level, and then the legal process, none of that was done as part of the permit for the drain, but.
Right, I would just add that I think that a lot of the time is spent on the preparation work, and once the engineers have determined what the level should be, the actual court, legal process, it just depends on the court's docket, and it's a pretty
Right.
standard proceeding.
I think we'll want to put out like markers out when we get into the actual study, like when we come up with that elevation, and that's what I've done on other projects, and put them out there for like a season, or let people see where they're at across the lake, and they get a good idea of feedback, and this is too high, this is too low, and rather than kind of anecdotal information that Jim or I might get, so.
We have had a lot of that feedback this summer. Long Lake, we know, the highest it was this summer was 19 inches below the concrete structure that I'm sure Brian's got the elevation of. The lowest, or it was at 22, and the lowest it was 26 and a half. On Cloverdale Lake, we set a marker at the highest that it was this spring when there was flooding. When we were 10 inches down, there was nobody flooded out. When we were 18 inches down, people were having trouble getting through the channels. So we got a pretty good idea. I mean, other than doing major reconstruction on channels, that's, you got a pretty close range, and they've got all that stuff documented. And this is something that, unbeknownst to me, we could, if the board decided to, they could skip the preliminary study on Cloverdale and Long Lake. I don't know about Pleasant Lake so much.
They could.
It's optional, yeah, it's
And
completely
go
optional.
directly to petitioning the court to set the legal lake level.
But you're not suggesting that, are you?
On Cloverdale and Long Lake, I'm comfortable with that because they've done all the surveying, they've done the wetland thing. We would have to get you a different resolution to do that. But that way, you know, there's not any expense on a preliminary study. Brian's done all the work.
Right, we've more or less, the reason we're here and think this is feasible is because we've already done that part of it. So we could go through and actually write the report, sure. If not, we could skip right into the process for those two lakes.
So,
Go ahead.
so why are we doing the feasibility study on those lakes then?
If not, I mean, that's how it's written in the statute, that the board may do those things, that's what we wrote it, but it's certainly not required.
I mean, I think the idea was that the board could have information as to the costs, more or less, or what is it feasible, and what would this cost be to actually complete it as part of it. And talking to Michael, that was my understanding.
That kind of goes into my question. How come one of them is 5,000, another one's 2,500, another one's 2,500?
Because 90% of the work has been done on Cloverdale and Long Lake this summer. We had to have that in,
90%?
but the feasibility studies.
Yeah, and those are high, not to exceed numbers. I would presume
Okay.
would be like half of that, so.
Well, that would be that, then they shouldn't be charging 2,500 if it's 90% done.
We had to put a
Right.
number in there,
And not to exceed numbers, so I just
yeah.
we put like a high number in there, so.
Okay. This is not to exceed, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Procedure-wise, we complete the preliminary study, probably since most of it's been done. You've been tracking water levels on these lakes since 18?
Since 2018, we have some records.
Yeah.
It sounds like beginning of 2019, we have.
We're thorough since the beginning of last year.
Extensive records since 2019.
Okay. And procedural-wise, preliminary study comes back in a couple weeks. It comes back before the board?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Is there an opportunity, if the board then says that we want to go forward with setting a legal lake level for, let's just use Cloverdale and Long, or in those lake districts, is there an opportunity for a public hearing? Is there something that allows input?
Yeah, there's a whole public hearing process in the lake level study part of it. There's a whole,
He means before the second.
oh, yeah, I mean, you can certainly do that.
When does that come, when would the Lake Association for Chain of Lakes or Long Lake have input as to going forward with the study, once you come back with a cost and say, well, the study is X to finish the study? I know that it's a little more complicated because the actual construction of the lake level structures and bridge replacements and that type of stuff are in the drain district versus the assessment district for the lake. That's where it gets a little more complicated. But is there going to be a public hearing? Will there be a time of input?
I mean, we certainly can, that's
One of
your,
the sections that's required is testimony and evidence offered by all interested parties.
but that's in the study
Right, there,
part.
so the actual court hearing itself, I mean, this wouldn't be whether to proceed after the study is done, but just in the actual setting of the lake level part, the court hearing, we would have to notice every single person that was going to be in the special assessment district. They would come in, and the judge generally allows everyone to speak, you know, and offer their evidence as to what the lake level should be. As far as input into whether we proceed after the preliminary study would be done, I mean, I think,
certainly
again,
can
we
if
could
you
hold
wanna
a
do
public
that.
hearing. I don't think that we would proceed with setting a lake level and not have input of all of the stakeholders in those particular areas.
I mean, we could do the preliminary study, provide it to you, and then if you wanna have like some kind of public hearing, I don't
Yeah.
see why there's any reason not to.
Well, it would, being on one
Let
of
it
those.
proceed.
Being on one of those boards, we can certainly talk to them and see what the next step would be, but it would, I would think that, based on the results, if it comes back you know, and what amount that is. There will be an assessment, and I think you covered some of that with us on what those assessments potentially could be. But to talk to those stakeholders to be sure where we're going with this, just to have some input from it.
Sure, and I mean, I think what would make most sense to me is that, you know, we notice them or make sure that they're informed of the next Board of Commissioners meeting, that, you know, the preliminary study is then given to everybody. And then it would, you know, essentially be up to you guys to make that motion to whether to proceed or not. I think the input would be critical at that step. You know, that would inform you all as to whether to make that motion to continue.
Okay, so procedure-wise, preliminaries are done, and as Brian said, relatively quickly in a couple weeks. So this could be back before the board again, first week in March, potentially.
Or is it possible to get the cow in February, the second cow? Could we have it done in 2 weeks?
Probably.
That's my thinking, is if we can get it back to the next cow, so you guys can consider it, and then, you know, maybe the BOC of that, the following, you hold over across the street and invite people to give input.
And I'm assuming we're talking, when you say done, that because of most of the work's been done on Chain of Lakes and Long Lake,
Yep.
that would be for those two, that the Pleasant Mud Lake is gonna take a little more time?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, but yet, all of those are intimately connected, because Pleasant Lake is flooding, but until we open up Floria Road, which goes into Glassby and Crooked Lake, and Crooked Lake water is gonna run northward through. Okay, so this is all working in concert to get all these things done. So the permit for the Crooked Lake issue to go away, that we've been talking about for 2.5 years now, this is a big step in making that happen.
Right, and remember, this is a solution to do this work, get all the structures in place, route the water north from Crooked Lake, to get it down like 2 feet or so, or 1.5 feet, substantially a large amount this year. But then this is not the ultimate end solution that we're proposing. It's actually to take the water to the south. We just can't do that and get 2 feet off the first year with what we're trying to propose to take it off the south.
So this is a short-term solution.
Right.
Okay.
Now, we want to leave it in place going forward so that should it be needed later, but one of the biggest issues the state had was they said, how do we know you're not just going to stop after this? Was their big concern. And we said, well, by doing this as a permit process, you know, we're capped at 5 years. They can always, you know, at the end of 5 years, we could potentially put everything back if there weren't lake levels in place, for example, was their big concern.
Okay,
So,
so the lake levels are an important part of this.
yeah,
And
they're key.
Our rationale with the Pleasant and Mud Lake thing is, when we replaced the culvert on Floria, we asked the DEQ at that time to allow us to put a lake level structure in there. They would not allow it. The only regulation we have on that culvert is the bottom of the culvert. And our fear is the DEQ, we got an after the fact permit, but they could tell us, you know, we don't have any way to set that lake level at this point, without a study, without setting a lake level through the courts. And I don't believe there's anybody on Pleasant or Mud Lake that wanna see us open that thing up and take 3 feet off Pleasant Lake. I mean, for a week or two, they'd be happy as a lark. But after that, they'd realize, wait a minute, we didn't wanna lose all that water. And we don't, under our jurisdiction, have any place other than the bottom of that culvert to set that lake. I don't think they wanna be planting onions again in the bottom of Mud Lake, so.
Yeah, well, I think the other issue too is that M43 at Cloverdale Road was closed for what, 2 months this year? So I know MDOT's got a stake in seeing this problem fixed, and I think at least we've suggested that they're willing to kick in on some of this, but enhancing the drainage out of Cloverdale Lake will certainly take care of some of that flooding, which is already bad. And the Long Lake, at the exit of Long Lake, that could certainly use an upgrade as well. So, and I think there's a value to these lake levels. I think most lakes, if they can have a permanent lake level set, that's a benefit going forward as far as controlling the water. So I think with the conversations I've had with those two boards, or people on those boards, that they are in favor of moving forward with the preliminary study, but I think they want to know what the numbers are.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing on the outlet along Lake, when I was down there, I was talking to an older gentleman. He actually put in the concrete structure at the outlet along Lake many years ago, and he explained to me how much re-rod's in it and what sack mix and the whole 9 yards. But he said at that time they ditched downstream of there, and the whole lake went down over a foot. And I just don't think them people would be happy if we didn't do our due diligence and try to get lake levels there so they know they're gonna be able to run their boats or go into their favorite fishing spots, so.
No, from a homeowner standpoint, living in a lake, it's, I don't see any, it's a complete benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any negatives. Now, from an ecological standpoint, environmental standpoint, the state actually doesn't necessarily like they like fluctuations, and some, like pike, for example, spawn like in very shallow flood areas a lot of times. So they don't like necessarily lake levels all the time, but from a homeowner's perspective, I can't see a negative in it. I would think you'd want to know it can't go be a certain elevation higher or lower and have all this flooding happen again.
Commissioner Smoker?
Yes, do we have any idea what it's gonna cost the people in these drain districts overall to get this all done, get the lake levels all the same? Are we talking hundreds of thousands, millions?
Millions.
In millions in these drain districts?
Well, in regards to the Watson drain and the Cloverdale drain, I mean, combined, yeah, it's over a couple million, for sure.
Okay.
Is that going into the, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is to David. So when you said they want to see the numbers, are you meaning where they want it, the number of where, the height of the lake, or the number on the costs?
Cost primarily.
Okay.
I want to see what the costs are. I know Chain of Lakes has got an assessment they're already looking at for weed control on there. But also, I mean, they obviously want to have some input on where the water level's going to be. I'm pretty connected to where it is on Long Lake, but not so much on Cloverdale Lake. But I know when you're putting in potentially a 3-foot culvert, upsizing from a 10-inch culvert, that's a pretty big jump. It's going to require some type of water control structure in there. So there's some concern over where that lake level's set, and if there's not a lake level structure, you're going to eliminate a lot of water in a hurry. So
No, there has to be a control on it either way. Either if we didn't go through this process, we'd still probably be doing the same thing, just not legally going through the process. As far as the numbers, like to complete what we told you a couple weeks ago is pretty accurate, like the ranges we told you. I mean, no one in the state would get a lake level done on their property for this cheap, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Dan and then John.
did that answer your question, Vivian?
Yes, thank you. I didn't know what you meant by
On
numbers.
the millions that you mentioned, is that putting it into the Kalamazoo River? Is that the long range?
Yes and no.
We're not
Yes.
currently exploring any surface water outlet.
Not a surface water outlet, but like that's the watershed divide between Kalamazoo and Grand River is actually
The ultimate goal is to keep the water within that watershed as the long-term use of floodway.
right. So the divide in the ground, you know, is somewhere between Lower Crooked and Upper Crooked in that area. And so ultimately the end solution is to mimic that going forward. So we don't take water out of Kalamazoo River watershed and take it all to Grand River and dry up the trout streams to the south of there.
It's not I think your question is more, are we gonna have a direct outlet that goes directly? We can't take it to
No.
Springbrook, and we can't take it directly to Gull Lake. So it'll be an infiltration. What Brian's seeing is an infiltration bed that goes into the ground and goes the same way the water does now, which feeds both Springbrook and Gull Lake.
Okay.
It does, if you put a piece of dye in there, it would eventually get out to the Kalamazoo River. I guess that's the best way to explain it.
For a long, long time.
When I'm in a walker, but
Might
still.
be 30 years, but
Okay, I just was curious if that included that as a long range.
That is the long
Fix.
range solution, is that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Smoker?
Not familiar with all the lakes down there. What is included in Chain of Lakes? I've heard it mentioned a couple of times.
It's Cloverdale, Wilkinson, Jones, and that Mud Lake.
and the Delton drain.
No, it's not part of Chain of Lakes.
No, but it feeds in.
Right, but that's not included with the
Yeah.
lake level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-6, resolution for preliminary study of Cloverdale Lake, Wilkinson Lake, Jones Lake, and Mud Lake. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-7, resolution for preliminary study of Long Lake.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Jackson, support by Gibson. Same discussion, just a different resolution?
Yep.
Anybody have any more questions for, or discussion on this one? Hearing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-7, resolution for preliminary study of Long Lake. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-8, resolution for preliminary study of Pleasant Lake and Mud Lake.
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Jackson, support by Gibson. ACKS. Same issue? Any other?
This one, because we don't have the majority of the work done on this one like the other two, if we could probably still do the preliminary one. It might not be within 2 weeks we'd get this preliminary one done.
That's
what
why
I'm
it's
saying.
separate.
Yeah.
The first two priorities will
Yeah.
along.
I mean, these feed, as soon as the Cloverdale and Long Lake that issue's fixed up, then we'll move right to this one, but we don't have all the information done on this one like we did the others. And the urgency's not there as far as with our permit. I understand the urgency is they're flooding, but
Timeframe?
I mean, ultimately, that lake level can't be actually controlled until this takes place. So
Right.
even if the study's done, and it's a preliminary study, and they've got second larger study, until Upper Crooked Lake is lowered, there's no way of actually lowering level.
so for the preliminary, like if we could just have like 6 weeks, for example, rather than 2, that'd help. Because we're gonna get a public hearing on this permit as the other thing that's gonna come forward, and that's gonna be a lot of work in the end of February probably, so.
You think the public hearing will be at the end of February?
Not with the lake level, this is with the permit, the drain permit.
For the drain permit and that's Watson Drain and Cloverdale Drain. Will everybody be petitioned in both those districts or just in the
Only the
Watson Drain
people that
district?
are impacted,
It's mainly the riparian owners on Long Lake.
it's gonna be the riparian owners on Long Lake and Cloverdale Lake that will be noticed.
Okay, and time frame for, moving out of this for a second, time frame for the project as far as construction, if the lake levels are approved, it goes into the circuit court for a hearing, correct? If the circuit court sets those lake levels, I don't know if you see that being done in 30 days, 60 days, what the process is with
Not
that.
that soon.
So,
Right, it would
The-
all depend on when we file that particular petition, and like I said, most of the time will be spent in the prep work, once it's figured out and determined, based on the other lakes, is my understanding, what the Pleasant Lake and Mud Lake level should be, then we file a petition in the court, and
Remember, the structures are gonna get built as part of the drain project. So, and those need to be done in like April, end of March, April, so that we're ready to go. What, May 1st?
May 1st.
We wanna start pumping. We got a time frame, May 1st to October 15th to pump.
And
Do you
these
need
are
a lake
adjustable, that will
No.
have permanent, when they're we'll put structures in, Brian's setting structures that are adjustable for now, and then they end up permanent when we're done. That gives us a little time to get the court action.
We don't need the legal lake level in order to get this permit. We just need they need to know that this process is underway, basically.
okay, so the structures will be adjustable
Yep.
at the onset and then permanent after the court action sets
Yes,
that level.
Exactly.
All right, so time frame wise, you would like to be taking water off Crooked Lake by May,
May 1st.
June,
No, May 1st.
May 1st, okay?
We have a window from when we can take water off, basically.
Okay, at what point, because Pleasant Lake, Mud Lake are involved in this, at what point, how much water would you have to get off Crooked Lake before you would open that drain at Floria Road a little bit to relieve some of the flooding on Pleasant Lake?
What Doug has told us, because we had the lawsuit that we had to get through, so therefore we couldn't take any water off. He has now said that as long as we're pumping more off Crooked Lake than we're letting out of Mud Lake, he will allow us to do it, and he doesn't believe we'll get sued.
So there's actually hope for everybody in this process if we get this thing going, okay? Okay, that's interesting, that's an interesting time frame. That's an aggressive time frame based on what I thought it would be, but,
We gotta get it done.
okay.
Gotta get done.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-8, resolution for preliminary study of Pleasant Lake and Mud Lake. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much, appreciate it.
Next on our agenda is Jim Yarger.
Sorry I'm late. When I seen who it was on the phone, I probably shouldn't have answered it.
Well,
Anyway,
maybe. So the question before the committee is to recommend to
Took my
the,
chair. That's fine. I can do this quickly. Let's go.
the question before the committee is to
What you get for
recommend
being late, Jim?
to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-5, resolution to approve the fiscal year 2019 Homeland Security Grant Program intergovernmental funding agreement between the County of Van Buren and the County of Berry, and authorize the chairman and the administrator to sign.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Gibson, second by Parker. The floor is yours.
So this is well, I shouldn't say it's annually because it depends on when the grants come out with. This is the same recurring grant that we get funding filtered to us from the region. So it's for the dollar amount in there is what we get to do trainings and conferences and stuff. Now we'll also get, there's normally regional projects we do that come through these grants, and this agreement lets the fiduciary pay for that and take care of all that, and then turns that ownership over to the county.
Any questions?
There's no match, so,
This is the same as last year then?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Hearing none, the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-5, resolution to approve the fiscal year 2019 Homeland Security Grant Program intergovernmental funding agreement between the County of Van Buren and the County of Berry, and authorize the chairman and administrator to sign. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Item is approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Do we need to take a break? All righty, let's power through. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-9, resolution amending the Berry County Board of Commissioner Rules of Procedures and Regulations.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Moved by Connor, second by Smelker. Discussion.
What's so different in these than what we've been going by?
What we've been going by is,
For the audience more than me, because I got it down
Right.
here, but the audience might want to know.
Yeah, we don't have copies.
I'm sorry. It should be in your board packet, and I'm not understanding why it isn't. So in section I of our board rules, and it's on page 8, so it's in the procedure part. It is section I, and it says comments from the floor. And the last number, so it'd be number 4 under I, it says, public comment shall be limited to no more than 3 minutes per individual and at the times designated as stated above, except where extended privileges are granted by the chairperson. That language is still included in number 1 in the new public comment section. So anyone who desires to speak under subsection B, .1, section G, and S of Article 4, limited public comment shall be limited to no more than 3 minutes per individual and at the times designated as stated above, except where the extended privileges are granted by the chair. Same language. Persons may address the board only on matters or issues which are relevant and germane to county government. Each person who speaks shall direct his or her comments to the chairperson. The chairperson shall call to order any person who is behaving in a disorderly manner by speaking or otherwise disrupting the proceedings, by failing to be germane or by speaking longer than the allotted time, by speaking vulgarities, by making comments that are intimidating, threatening, harassing, or disrespectful, or by making comments directed at a member of the public. Such persons shall thereupon be seated until the chairperson shall have determined whether the person is in order. If a person engaged in a limited public comment shall be ruled out of order, he or she shall not be permitted to speak further at the same meeting except upon special leave of the board. If the person shall continue to be disorderly and to disrupt the meeting, the chairperson may order the sergeant-at-arms, who shall be the county sheriff or any of his deputies, to remove the person from the meeting. No person shall be removed from a public meeting except for an actual breach of peace committed at the meeting. So that's the proposed amendments. I think that we have had situations in the past that we have had issues with decorum in public meetings. This is not specifically targeted towards any one person, but at all of us to remember to use our best language when we come to public meetings and to discuss things that the county has control over. So if somebody came to give me the basketball scores from last night, that is not germane to county business. We have no control over it. We have no say over it. It's really a waste of the committee's time. This is, we have a very targeted agenda, and we have very specific things that we need to talk about, but just to come up and filibuster is not appropriate at this meeting. To use your time at the mic, I'll address like number 4, to harass or be disrespectful to another member of the public. If I get up here and I use my 3 minutes to try to belittle the sheriff and tell him he's doing a rotten job and use my most colorful vocabulary, that would be out of line, because this is not his meeting, this is our meeting, and we are here to discuss county business and not berate the sheriff. The same as not argue with Larry Bass because we don't agree with his opinion on toast. These amendments were reviewed by our attorneys, and caution was given to that the board chair should act cautiously when ruling somebody out of order, as it would be limiting somebody's free speech. But I just want to remind you that slander is not covered under free speech, and if you slander somebody on tape, then or in the recording, it is of public record, and you can be held accountable for that. So it is with mixed emotion that I recommend some of these bylaw changes, but at the same time, it is an effort to protect the integrity of our meetings and the reason why we're here. Commissioner Geiger?
There are so many reasons why I am deeply opposed to these new rules. First of all, it is a solution in search of a problem, in my opinion. In my 10 years on this board, there hasn't been a single time, not a single event, where we have decided we could have used those rules or needed to have guidelines on how people should behave. We've never needed to read people guidelines or read them their Miranda rights. Second, there will be unintended consequences of requiring people to be germane to county government. Under this policy, no more statements from Bob Vanderboe thanking our veterans. No more statements from Rick Moore celebrating our trails, and no more Sharon Zabrowski promoting teamwork. Just the narrow business of approving minutes, budgets, and contracts. Finally, with all respect to our board, we cannot pass new limits on the public when our own house is not in order. The Hastings Reminder this weekend had an article about how the courthouse door was locked during our workshop meeting, very unfortunately. So if we're going to start regulating public meetings, we should start by requiring the county to unlock the front door.
Commissioner Connor?
I would like to say that the reason that this was started during the meeting that I chaired, when I said it is our policy, and I said, I don't know about addressing the public, I can't say, but we will check into it. That is when this started. After the meeting, I asked Michael to check into it, and that's how this started, was because we wanted to check in what the Open Meetings Act does say about addressing not the public body, because we're the public body, but to address the public that's attending the meeting. And after that meeting, I asked Michael to start to check on that, and that's when this started, and we contacted our attorney.
Smoker?
I guess on my thoughts is, I personally think we need the part in there where they address the board. You cannot have people disagreeing with other public opinion, turning around and calling them out. They have to address the board with their comments. As far as I'm concerned, they can talk to us about their grandkids if they want. I'll listen for 3 minutes. So the germane part, I'll listen to anything. But you cannot turn around and start a squabble with another public. We are not allowed to answer, so we'll sit here and listen. You can't turn and call someone out in the audience, and that's got to stop. And that has happened before, Ben, and you've been here a lot longer than I have, because there's security here, and there was a reason for it. Just called you out.
Commissioner Jackson?
I have some questions on it as well. And I'm not sure, Joel Ibbotson, I think, was in attendance when we had a question about how that went. He sent an email, and I'm not sure how many of you guys got that email, if that was just directed to me. So he cites some legal doctrine, I guess, for lack of a better term, General Attorney Opinion 5281 on item 2. Persons may address the board only on matters or issues which are relevant or germane to county business. That's not in compliance with Attorney General Opinion 5218. So I'm curious if our attorney would have a different opinion on that.
So I do have an email from our attorney.
Okay.
It says, attached is an AG opinion, case law, and a research memo pertinent to public comment at an open meeting, and permissible restrictions on the time, place, and manner and content of speech. In essence, the board must permit a person to address a meeting of public body under rules established and recorded by the public body, which is MCL 15.263, Section 5. The board's rules may require that the public comment be directed to the board chair and that it be relevant and germane to county business. Example, on matters within the county board's jurisdiction and authority, but the rules must be neutral as to viewpoint. Caution must be made not to impinge on a person's First Amendment rights, but a board meeting is a limited forum restricted to particular purposes. Persons whose comments are harassing or frivolous may be ruled out of order, and persons may be removed from the meeting for a breach of peace. MCL 15.263, Section 6.
Okay. That's a long explanation.
And there are, I mean, I don't have the attachments in front of me, but if you wanted to see them, I can definitely get them. These emails were directed to Michael. So, and in his absence, I agreed to share the comments.
Yeah, and I share some of Ben's concerns, limiting free speech. I think that because the board has oversight to a lot of county functions, if somebody wants to come up here and complain because they have an issue with a county office or the way something was handled, I think that's relevant to the board, even though it's not on our agenda. So, and I don't think that you would limit that.
No.
If that in there, but the way it's worded is a little restrictive, versus what the intent is of our meetings. And I think for the most part, we had an interesting situation at a Board of Public Works meeting a year ago, but for the most part, we haven't had issues that people understand when they come in, that we haven't had people calling out. So I'm not opposed to reviewing this in a little more detail or refining it, but I don't think I can support the entire document at this point. But I don't mind the intent, but it's hard to govern intent. So-
It is, and that's why it would need to be written. It's just like our decorum in meetings. We're not permitted to use vulgarities and inappropriate comments during our comment times. And so it much is, reminding people that this is a public body and you should use your best vocabulary when you come here. And not be slanderous towards people in our community and not pick a fight. And that's the reason why we have security here.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't mind an opinion on some of the information or some of the Attorney General opinion cited in his email, just to see how that stacks up, because some of it in a conversation with him is from the 70s, some of it's from a few years ago. So it's just how it all blends together to be sure, because as Ben pointed out, we don't want to be too restrictive and set ourselves up for more issues, more lawsuits, more complaints, that when what we're doing has been working, with very few exceptions, for the most part, it's been working, in my view, for 5 years. So,
Vivian?
So just a couple of things. So when David said if somebody had a problem with a county office and wanted to come before us during open public comment, but number 2, it says which are relevant and germane to county government. So that no matter what, it doesn't have to be on that agenda to talk about it if somebody wanted to come before us, correct? Mm-hmm. All right.
We've had a lot of people come and talk about zoning issues, or they've had toast issues, or issues with this department or that department, and this is the right forum for that. Though we do have a policy that we do not comment on public comments during our meeting. We have a tendency to approach that person after the meeting if we can, if they haven't left, especially if they're from our districts, to discuss their issue and find out more information. Because 3 minutes really isn't enough time to find out issues on zoning, or issues on problems with the health department, or whatever department we're talking about. That has been our practice. I think that sometimes we seem to be a target for somebody, lashing out, and I think we take it really well. I do not think that previous commissions did so well with attacks like that. So I think it's just part of reminding people that there is a decorum that you need to maintain in a public meeting.
I had 2 things.
I've got.
Go ahead.
My second question is, in regards to what David had said, is if this was passed on to the board for a decision, is it possible that within the week we could forward that letter to our attorney and have him comment on those AG opinions?
I think we could.
We could?
I don't know how fast the attorney will turn it around. I don't know how busy their office is.
Right, but we would do that, okay.
What is the board's thoughts on addressing the board and not turning and addressing the public? That's my main thing. I don't believe you can have public turning and attacking the public. And that has happened. And calling them out by name only because they have a different opinion than you do. Everyone has the right to their opinion. Mm-hmm. So I think that should stay in there, and I thought it was before, that they have to address the board. not the
I've-
rest of the public.
I've seen that on a lot of the
And how does it
agendas.
work in the legislature? Do you address the board or the chair?
You address the speaker.
I've seen that on a lot of the, at the bottom of the agendas on some of the meetings, it says right on their comment, public comment will be limited to 3, and you will address the chair. I mean, I've seen it right on the bottom of agendas at other meetings.
Don't have a problem what they say, but they gotta say it up here. And I guess they're gonna call one of us out no matter what.
Right.
But,
Or all of us.
or all of us.
Well, and I think Catherine pointed out how long you can speak, and where you're from, when, there's a few things that we have the ability to limit. Whether addressing the board is one of them is a question for the attorney, so.
Well,
because-
even in new commissioner school, they tell you that you can't force somebody to tell you where they're from.
Okay.
And you can't make them sign in. You can ask them to tell you where they're from, but if they don't,
But you think it's against their rights to just address the board?
Well, in an email, they've cited an opinion that says it is. However, if our attorney cites a different case law that says it isn't, then, I mean, that'd be an interesting point to find out also.
well, this isn't the place to come up here and pick a fight with Rick Moore about trails, because he's not even here to make a decision. He's here as a citizen and exercising his right to participate in our meeting. So I have issues with addressing somebody other than the board in a meeting, just because you know that they're gonna be
Well,
here.
comments can be addressed to the board, but they can still reference something that somebody else said.
Well, they can say
correct?
anything they want, they just have to rush from the
Yep.
board.
Commissioner Geiger?
I don't think public comment is broken. And I worry about changing the relationship that we have with the people that come up to this microphone. Yeah, we have received, comments that don't make us feel warm and fuzzy. And over my 10 years, I've heard a lot of them. And I will fight for that person's right to criticize their government and to criticize me. I don't want to put any more rules on what public comment should be and shouldn't be. There's rules on public decency, but we shouldn't try to dictate or micromanage what the public says.
You say they should be able to turn and confront someone else in the public.
I see your point there, and I would agree with it. People that come up to the microphone are talking to the Board of Commissioners. They want them to take an
That's my
action.
main point. Thank you.
But this is a very flawed way to fix a problem that I don't think is that big of a problem.
We've had a lot of public comment over the years that wasn't agenda-related, and we've got through it. So I wouldn't want to do too many changes.
I agree with that. I would like to address somehow the locked door thing. I think it was because posters were up there and the door happened to be shut.
No, no.
No,
that
it was
One
the
down-
outside.
downstairs.
Security locked it
The
when they
outside,
left.
I thought maybe it was because you couldn't get in this door.
No, our
Okay.
meeting started at 4:00 and security left at 5, and we didn't let them know that we were still here having an open meeting.
Soon as Michael knew it was locked, he went and unlocked it.
Okay.
Rebecca got in.
Huh?
Rebecca got in, didn't she?
Well, I think she was one that was locked out, weren't you, Becca? But she did get in, yes.
But there's no policy in the board rules that we have to unlock the door. These are things that we should know. I mean, we're elected officials. If we're going to pass any rule, it's that we should unlock the door.
Chair.
Just real quick, there was a communication problem, and I'd like to know, if we are going to have a late-night meeting or security is going to be leaving, who's going to take on responsibility to make sure a door is locked? I think that's all we need to accomplish there.
Michael always does that, if he's here.
Well, I'm asking you to let my security know who's going to be responsible so they can.
Because it's their job to lock it.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm fine with it the way it was.
I mean,
If I've ever seen anything, it was between commissioners that I've seen that, where you'd want to shut them up, so.
Yeah, the previous board you served on.
There
was
is some
kinda
things that
like
need to be said, though.
Is there any suggestions before we move ahead with the vote?
Just the one that I made about having the attorney look at those. If,
Would you like to move to postpone this or just move to?
not today.
Okay. So the question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 20-9, resolution amending the Berry County Board of Commissioners Rules of Procedures and Regulations. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Aye. Opposed? Nay. Aye, that sounds like 5 to me. All righty. Next before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to appoint Matthew Roser to serve in a position representing the recycling industry on the Berry County Solid Waste Oversight Committee for the remainder of a 3-year term that began on November 1st, 2018 and expires on October 31st, 2021.
So moved.
Or,
Moved by Parker, support by Geiger. Discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
Sidebar communications are not approved
Sorry about that.
during the meeting. Thank you.
I read
Keep
the-
order.
I read the email from Matt Roser, who's requesting to be put on this board. Do we have a letter?
So the description of the action is recently Eric Schaefer was appointed as the recycling industry position as representative of waste management. There was an email correspondence from Matthew Roser, district manager for waste management. Eric's role has changed and he is no longer involved at the Hastings site. Mr. Roser is requesting that he replace Eric Schaefer on the Solid Waste Oversight Committee.
Exactly, but do we have a letter of resignation from the previous one? Because I'm looking
I
at
do not
this,
know.
and the email is from the gentleman who wants to be appointed.
It sounds like he's a supervisor there or something and explaining why Mr.
Oh, yes, I understand
Schaefer's
that.
not here. I do not have access to that. It would be something that
We don't have a letter of resignation from the board?
Michael prepared this and I do not know.
Okay.
Do we have anybody here from the oversight?
I do. I am.
I do.
Is
Ben's
he-
on there.
Is he, is he gone?
I usually attend by teleconference, so I'd have to hear his voice first. Frank would know. Well, our last meeting, we had a workshop, so that wasn't a typical public meeting, so I'm not sure, John.
You
Jim
wanna
on there?
table
You know
it?
if that fellow left, Jim? You're on the oversight one?
Oh, yeah, we put Jim on.
Do you know if that fellow left and there's an opening? Okay.
Did the board receive a letter of resignation from him? You don't know that?
We could find out before next week.
Yeah, tentatively put him on to move him ahead to the board and find out if there's a
Letter of
resignation letter or it's true.
You want me to remove my motion?
What motion did you make? To postpone it? There wasn't a second.
No, to support him to vote on
I second.
Pending a letter of, or a letter from the board saying he's no longer on there.
We can have it go
it.
to
From
items for
That Eric's not
consideration.
on there anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
We can have it go to items for consideration so we can get comments from Michael or clarification.
Whatever.
Any other discussion? The question before the committee is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to appoint Matthew Roser to serve in a position representing the recycling industry on the Berry County Solid Waste Oversight Committee for the remainder of a 3-year term that began November 1st, 2018 and expires on October 31st, 2021. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The item is approved. Limited public comment. At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the committee may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Well, first of all, thank you for the, getting the member on the Solid Waste Committee. And speaking of that, I talked to Amanda Robbins. She's our recording secretary. Our meetings are held on the second Friday of the month. And I asked her that normally the minutes follow that, maybe the third or fourth week, whatever, for our meeting. I asked her that if she could get those in a manner that not the next commissioners meeting, but the following one, if those meetings would be available. In other words, if we had those today, all your discussion would be, you wouldn't have to have it. So getting those minutes a little earlier is going to help, and she's going to do that. And listening to everybody with Jim Dull and his crew there, it was, how long will this take? A couple of weeks. I highly suggest that you put a time and a date on a piece of paper and print it so you know that. Not throwing rocks at them, but if we don't put dates on things, nothing happens. And we can look at all the studies that we've made over the last 14, 15 years on the COA and in the jail, that still nothing's done. And regarding the high water levels, yeah, no, we don't have climate change, but we can't flush a toilet now on Long Lake because the water is over the front porch. I would highly suggest that we get the health department looking at this situation too. Maybe there's something from a time and effort and a money standpoint they could help. I don't know that. As far as the public discussion, I agree. It's up to the chairperson to make sure that this person addresses them. They got 3 minutes, no more, no less. You hear them out, and that's the end of it. That's the way it should be. The minute you start regulating that beyond that, unless that person is physically abused or whatever, that's a whole different story. You need public comment. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Rick Moore, the harbor master of the Podunk Lake Yacht Club, and our water level is just fine because we've had a dam put in 1927, I believe, which is before my time. But I just wanted to say thank you for your vote on not changing very much the public comment portion of this meeting, because passionate taxpayers are like passionate volunteers, and they're very intense, and as long as they're directed in a proper fashion, then they can be extremely productive. And democracy is messy. And when they had a new chairman in here for a little while, then some people might have taken advantage of that situation and tried to bust things up a little bit. But you got to have a thick skin to be involved in politics because there's so many different points of view. And the people that are speaking at this chair at that time need to realize that the public they're talking to is an internet. And they shouldn't be talking to the people at their sides because they're talking to the entire community. And I wish to remind the board members that they are too, and speak into your microphone because we can't hear you very well, even sitting 10, 15 feet away. And others are complaining about that. And so I have a tendency to always use my outdoor voice because I want you to hear what I'm saying, so I only have to say it once. But I want to thank the board members for participating in government and being involved. And we all know you attend many meetings a week, and it's important for us to hear about it. And so I want to thank, once again, Joyce Snow for starting that, so we all know that Commissioner Gibson's working 7 days a week with all the meetings he goes to, and you all are. Maybe you don't keep track of them all because it's just not necessary. Like the Steam Club members, you just volunteer and do it. You don't try to take any rewards for it. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So I'm Rick Moore, and I support this message. Thank you.
Any other limited public comment this morning? Hearing none, is there any other business to come before the committee?
I would like to say a word about a friend of mine and friend of a lot of people in Berry County and a friend of the county. Gene Lamerall died this past Wednesday through complications of surgery. And Jean was a very active person in the Trails Association. She was a village council member in Middleville. She was also DDA director in Middleville. And she was just a lover of the trails and great grant writer, and just was a go-getter for just about all of her life. And we really are going to miss her. And just wanted to make sure that everybody knew about Jean Lamerall and the asset she's been to Berry County. Thank you.
She was always so positive, and
Very much into the history of the county too. Historical societies. Very nice lady.
I'm not from Middleville, but I know that it's going to be different without her.
On a different note, I do need to remind everybody that we will be having a Berry County Community Dialogue event hosted by the Berry County Commissioners on Thursday, February 13th, 2020 at 7 o'clock at the Johnstown Township Hall, located at 13641 South M43 Highway, Battle Creek. I think that's wrong. That's M37.
I'm not gonna make it if I
Yeah,
take 43.
37 and 43 don't join quite that far south, so it's M37. And it is on the east side of the road before you get to the county line. So if you make it to the county line, you just gotta come back, just a couple miles.
You get to Bedford, you've gone too
Yep,
far.
Bedford's too far. So if you get to Hickory Road and you're heading south, you went too far and you can turn around.
Is it Baseline Road that's down there?
Baseline is the county line. And Tuesday, February 18th at 7 p.m. at Thornapple Kellogg Middle School, room 1616, located at 10375 Green Lake Road, Middleville, Michigan, for the purposes of public participation in a discussion regarding a potential millage election for August 2020. The discussion will be facilitated by Tower Pinkster of Kalamazoo on the topics of current use and condition of the Berry County Jail and Sheriff's Office and current use and condition of the Commission on Aging facility in Hastings. If you have any questions, feel free to call the administrator, and a quorum of the Board of Commissioners may be present. So that's all I have. Any other business? There being no further business and without objection, the committee is adjourned.
Yeah, John,
You can strike that, John.